Good evening. You're joining the State of Business with me, Nishani Figuera. Here are tonight's main stories. Board of Investment Chairman resigns, citing personal reasons. And PM says SAARC countries should work together to fight terrorism and drug menace. President Maithripala Sirisena, who left the island this morning on a 3-day state visit to Bangladesh, reached the Dhaka International Airport this afternoon. He is visiting there at the invitation of Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. This is a first state visit to Bangladesh by the President after he assumed office. President Sirisena was warmly received by the President of Bangladesh, Mohammad Abdul Hamid. The President was accorded a Guard of Honour with 21-gun salute. The President will hold bilateral discussions with Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina tomorrow. During his visit, the two countries are expected to sign several bilateral agreements in the fields of agriculture, education, training of diplomats and immigration. The chairman of the Board of Investment, Upul Jayasuriya, has resigned from his post. The BOI spokesperson said that Jayasuriya tendered his resignation to the Secretary of President, citing personal reasons. Upul Jayasuriya, who is a lawyer by profession, had been heading the country's main investment body since February 2015. He is also a past president of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. In more news tonight, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says that SAARC countries should work together to address issues such as terrorism and drug trafficking in the region. He also noted that even though in Sri Lanka the armed conflict is over, there is more to be done to avoid its re-emergence.
The inaugural session of 8th SAARC Home Ministers meeting was held in Colombo this morning with the participation of delegates from the SAARC nations. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was the chief guest at the inaugural session.
Sri Lanka has had long experience in terrorism. Fortunately, we have now brought the armed conflict to an end. But we find that merely bringing an armed conflict to an end is not the means of ending terrorism. We are addressing the issues of the missing persons. These are difficult ones. There has to be confidence-building measures before you get into it. There are some who think you pass the laws and you enforce human rights. Okay, we want human rights, but it cannot take place without the confidence-building measures that are there.
Speaking further, the Prime Minister said most of the nations globally and in the region are affected by terrorism. He said that a unified effort is needed to address the issues of terrorism and drugs.
Drugs and terrorism has a connection, but that does not mean that every person who engages in criminal activity in regard to drugs is engaged in terrorism. No. How do we work with each other? I would say on this we have to take the realities of SAARC and the relationships that exist, the bilateral relationships that exist within SAARC. That cannot be ignored. We have to find ways of addressing this so that we are able to finally resolve those issues. But the principles are the same, but the differences are also major. But we have to find ways bridging these gaps going ahead. But until that, so on one hand, let's have a regional framework. But taking the reality into account, it may be necessary for us to have bilateral agreements within it, which were not contemplated when SAARC was started. But take the instance of drugs now. For instance, our relationship with our neighbors, India and Maldives on drugs, where you find small supplies coming in, is quite different from our relationship of how you deal it with Afghanistan and Pakistan, where large quantities come in. So even if there was no problem at all in SAARC, we still have to take a different perspective in regard to how we interact with India and Maldives and how we interact with Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Time for us to slip in for a short break. There's more news on the other side. Stay with us for that. Welcome back. You're watching The State of Business. Ministry of Industry and Commerce says Sri Lanka is planning to join the Information Technology Agreement, which is a global trade pact coming under the World Trade Organization. Director General of Commerce of Sri Lanka, Sonali Wijeyaratne, said this agreement will help Sri Lanka in removing tariffs on IT products. These details were disclosed at a national workshop on Information Technology Agreement organized by the Department of Commerce and WTO in Colombo recently.
The Information Technology Agreement, which was concluded in 1996, is a landmark of deal to facilitate growth of trade in information technology sector. Under this agreement, each member country requires to keep customs duties at zero for all products specified in the agreement. At present, IT exports accounts for 15% of global manufacturing exports, despite the falling price of some of the main product categories.
The question is whether we compare Sri Lanka to like economies or assess our production, competitiveness and capacities and feasibility of benefiting from the ITA, or whether we look at countries that have succeeded in the ITA with large economies of scale and incomparable status and decide erroneously that what goes for them is okay for us. We have discussed with the WTO in the preparatory process that the most important segment of this discussion is to focus specifically on the tariff profile of Sri Lanka and the simulation of ITA schedule in the case of Sri Lanka. We are now merely looking at an ITA agreement here as to what extent Sri Lanka could benefit or what challenges Sri Lanka would encounter in a possible membership in the ITA.
Managing partner of KPMG, Reyaz Mihular, says Sri Lankan businesses should step up their planning and execution process in order to gain maximum use of the GSP Plus benefit. The EU renewed GSP Plus trade concessions to Sri Lanka in mid-May this year. However, the EU does not grant these trade concessions to countries that have exceeded the per capita income beyond $4,000 mark. At present, Sri Lanka's per capita income is around $3,800.
The Sri Lanka branch of Chartered Management Institute of UK organised a forum in Colombo recently to discuss the potential of the GSP Plus to revive the economy. The forum was titled GSP Plus Unlocking Untapped Potential.
I don't think we have a big window. We have maybe a few years, because once we get into a certain category, we lose it again. Not for the earlier reasons, but for the reasons that we no longer fall within the eligibility criteria for GSP Plus. So we have a small window, and if we are going to make full use of this, we need to gear ourselves and start planning for how we can make full use of this. If you look at the past, the industries that used GSP Plus were pretty limited. We have to use this GSP Plus as an opportunity to get our act together, so that we fine-tune our processes, we get more market savvy as to what the market needs from us.
Let's find out how the stocks performed today after this break. Welcome back to the show. Trading at the Colombo Stock Exchange ended in a negative note today. The all share price index dropped by 7.68 points to close at 6,738.42, and the S&P SL index dropped by 3.1 points to close the session at 3,899.58. Turnover was 489.4 million and 24.7 million shares were traded. Up next, a look at the day's forex rates. And that's all the news we have for you tonight. Do join us again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you for watching. Have a pleasant evening.